I'm Blair Best, and tonight on The Story, we begin in Portland's Central East Side. This building behind me off East Burnside Street is the city's newest treatment center for those struggling with addiction. It opens on Monday, and it's our big story tonight. But before we get to that story, some breaking news we're following tonight. A big change to Multnomah County's policy regarding handing out tents and tarps to homeless people. Starting May 27th, the county will no longer hand out those supplies to people living on the streets, with the exception of severe weather events. Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson announced the change today.
The new rule as revised, further limits the distribution of certain county purchased gear, including direct distribution of tents, only during severe weather events. Year-round, the county is going to continue to distribute hygiene kits, basic first aid supplies, water, clothing, sleeping bags, and blankets to people who are living unsheltered.
Vega-Peterson went on to say that individual outreach providers will still be able to hand out tents and tarps whenever they want, but those supplies will not come from the county.
I want to, really make clear that our goal is to make sure that people in our community are safe and housed. And as we build more shelter beds and place more people in housing, our need to hand out supplies to help people survive will decrease. And that's a good thing. And this rule reflects that.
Vega-Peterson says county commissioners will review the new rule in December to check on how it's going. Other commissioners were supportive of the move, including Julia Brim-Edwards.
I've always felt that tents are not the solution to homelessness. When people are living on the streets without basic services, safety, we need to do better by them and also by our community. I think this is also an important acknowledgement about the real impacts that unmanaged encampments have on public health, safety, accessibility, livability, and I know we can do better.
In the chair's proposed budget, the county would consolidate 2 existing supply warehouses to 1. That change, along with this trimming of tent and tarp handouts, provides more than $900,000 that the county will use to maintain and expand other services. All right, now let's get back to our big story tonight. This new treatment center in Portland's Central East Side. Governor Tina Kotek made the trip from Salem for the big announcement. Neighbors I spoke with today tell me they're going to wait and see how the facility affects the community.
We are so excited for 74 beds to be opening next Monday. Let's do a round of applause.
Wednesday morning was a celebration for leaders of substance recovery in Portland.
It's important to know that most of the folks that we're going to be serving here have been deemed historically too complex to be served elsewhere.
Starting Monday, this former hostel and community space off East Burnside Street and 16th Avenue will be a residential treatment center for up to 74 people struggling with addiction.
Here in Central Portland, we are creating access, real, meaningful access to the services that are too often out of reach.
The center is referral-based and entirely voluntary. It's mainly for those exiting detox. People can stay for several months as they work towards permanent housing.
This facility is more than just a building. It represents a hard-fought shift in how we care for our community. It's a space for healing, recovery, and hope.
I think it's a wait-and-see thing.
Laura Erickson is part of the surrounding community who has concerns.
I didn't like the way we found out. We didn't have any voice or any impact or decision-making.
She runs this birthing center across the street, known for how quiet and peaceful it is, at least for now.
A lot of times, if there, is mental health issues, they can bring a lot of camping gear sometimes, or we've even had some people use our courtyard as a bathroom. So I don't want that to accelerate.
Well, like most people in our neighborhood, no one wanted this anywhere near.
Also nearby, this hair studio where Michael Hurley has worked for 10 years.
I think the neighborhood's scared that people are going to be rambling around the neighborhood at night.
This is a secure residential facility. This is not a front door. This is a back door to other stabilization centers. And I'm really proud that we are in our last couple of engagements with the Buckman and Kearns neighborhoods with a signed good neighbor agreement.
That agreement is scheduled to be signed in the coming weeks. A member for the Buckman Community Association sent KGW the following statement, saying in part, "While some members may have wanted more, I personally am very satisfied with the way Central City Concerns team responded to our concerns."
There's been some lip service, but we'll see what happens when they're actually open.
Medical staff will be at the treatment center 24/7, and whenever a patient wants to leave, we're told staff will go with them.
I think that's a really great idea, and I hope it does work out.
On Monday, 2 patients are moving in. It'll take several months to reach full capacity.
And with any operation that's this large, we have a multi-month ramp plan where we're going to be bringing in cohorts of 5 people at a time to ensure safety for our clients.
I think it's going to be a good program, and I wish them a lot of success because I think it's the missing link.
There will be 68 full-time employees on site 24 hours a day. And unique to this treatment center, staff will go with the patients whenever they want to leave. Apparently, they'll go with them everywhere, although I'm told staff does not expect anyone to travel farther than the Tri-County area. There's also concern among some neighbors about a parking lot across the street. It's where the patients will be allowed to smoke tobacco. And neighbors, including Michael, who works at that nearby hair salon, says it's too close to home.
Right in my backyard, in essence, but they've been very good about moving it to the outside corner of Burnside and making sure that there's fans blowing the smoke away from any neighborhood areas.
Okay, so there's that. Central City Concern, one of the largest providers in the city and the group in charge of running this East Burnside Street Center, spent $2.5 million on the site back in December 2023. Multnomah County and the state also pitched in. Those at Central City Concern referred to a study showing that Oregon needs about 500 of these types of recovery beds to meet the need. This site adds 74 more beds, designed to be a stepping stone for people leaving detox before they're ready for housing. Okay, so what do you think about this new treatment center? Or maybe you have thoughts about the county's new tent and tarp policy. Let us know. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Well, it's not often that the state of Oregon's revenue forecast makes headlines, but today it sure did, as the blame game was on full display in Salem. The forecast released this morning shows that the state will have around $500 million fewer dollars to spend based on past projections. Why is that? Well, it depends on who you ask. The state's chief economist says because Oregon is highly trade dependent, we tend to follow the trend of the national economy, which of course is in a state of uncertainty due to the on-again, off-again tariffs and because of the slowed national growth. We're feeling those effects here, with less business and corporate income tax revenue filling the state's general fund.
But the deteriorating growth outlook at the national level has direct implications to the state of Oregon. So I will say if we look at the performance of the economy in the state over the last 4 to 6 quarters, it has been underperforming relative to the national trends. So there is some local issues that are unique to the state, but more broadly, tariffs are a impediment to economic activity.
Governor Tina Kotek and other state leaders like Attorney General Dan Rayfield blame the Trump administration and decisions being made in Washington, D.C. She said the revenue forecast means challenges are ahead for state lawmakers when I asked her about this today.
We knew that this would be a challenging budget environment. We're going to have to be lean at state government, but we're going to stay committed to the investments that we know need to be made. Housing, homelessness, behavioral health, we cannot go backwards. We need to continue to go forward. And what we'll be doing in the next several weeks is working with our legislative leaders to prioritize those investments when and wherever possible, despite the challenges in the budget that we're going to see today with the forecast.
Republicans in Salem are not blaming the White House or anyone in the halls of Congress. Instead, they point the finger at those across the aisle.
I think that the governor's fear-mongering right now. I think that they have grown accustomed to being able to have a slush fund in our state budget and spend money on whatever they want and ignore the core functions of government. That idea that Oregon isn't responsible for the position we find ourselves in today just is patently false. What we have lacked is local leadership.
Now, despite the $500 million fewer dollars to spend, lawmakers still have more than $37 billion available for the next 2 fiscal years. That's up from around $32 billion just 2 years ago. Well, declining revenue forecasts and tough budget decisions were some of the consequences we heard about last night in our big story about Oregon's business climate. We talked with the head of a business advocacy group, Oregon Business and Industry, and then we heard from Jordan Schnitzer, who joined us live, getting the developers' thoughts. If you missed our segment last night, watch it anytime on the KGW YouTube channel. Both Schnitzer and business advocates were pretty blunt. Oregon is not the most business-friendly state, and a, quote, attitude adjustment is needed in Salem to turn things around. Well, many of you agreed. George wrote to us saying, I run a 50-year-old Oregon family business, and we have moved out of Portland to Beaverton. I have never had a government person walk in the door to ask how they could help me grow our business and create jobs. Jordan clearly stated that government is out of touch and only interested in raising taxes.
You need to get a business-friendly climate in Portland and Oregon. As people move away, you're going to lose the income tax revenue, which is going to increase your deficit. So I think you can do that with local investment.
And Greg chimed in saying, I'm a lifelong Oregonian who laments the status of our city and state. I attended public schools, raised a family, and grew a small business here. I concur with Jordan's assessments that until there is a radical change in behaviors and policies related to business by our leaders, we will continue to lose ground. And Starr wrote in, we need social services, but we also need informed business leaders. We've been in short supply of charismatic visionary types that have the capacity to reorganize the social services agencies, build their trust, hold them accountable for spending and results, and then pivot to more pressing matters, like trying to attract new business to the core downtown area.
I'm still a registered Democrat and tend to vote Democrat in national elections. I don't vote that way anymore in local elections. I'm a landlord, and all the stuff with rent control and other restrictions on landlords makes me sympathize with the business owners.
But not everyone sides with Schnitzer and business groups in Oregon. A viewer named Mike wrote to us saying, I think it's about time for businesses to step up and be, quote, good citizens. They want all the rights of people, but they don't want to have to pay the taxes that the rest of the citizens have to pay. They are not job creators. The consumers are the job creators. Businesses just don't make up jobs out of the goodness of their hearts. They only make jobs when they profit enough from them.
It just doesn't make financial sense to stay in Portland.
Well, today I caught up with a small business owner in Southeast Portland, Dan McLaughlin. He runs Portland Syrups, a local company making flavored mixers for drinks. He started the business in 2012, and he says the local business climate has gotten more challenging.
You know, for us, running a small business in Portland, challenges are everything from just daily painting over graffiti to just constant rising taxes. But the biggest thing, I think, is just finding space to grow.
Well, Dan says his small Portland company is growing, and that's a good thing. He wants to go from a 5,000 square foot production space to 20,000 feet next year. But finding that in Portland and at a price that makes sense, he says, is not easy. He even went to the mayor's office last week asking for help.
When I asked them, what's the incentive to stay when my business next year it will cost us about $68,000 in taxes to stay in Portland as opposed to going to a Clackamas County or Oregon City. So what's the reasoning? And their best answer was, because we really want you to stay.
He plans on doubling his staff from 15 to 30 next year. He tells me it is likely he will have to leave the city in order to do that. But he's still weighing his options because he doesn't want to leave.
And we're literally Portland Syrups. I mean, we named ourselves after the city in 2012 because we love it, and it was a mecca for food and beverage, and we really love Portland. But we might have to leave Portland, and not just because of the finances, because it's, you know, to buy a new space and to get it permitted, it just takes ages. I think the city has a PR issue, and I think that right now people aren't coming to Portland like they used to, and I think that we need to change how the nation sees us and the world sees us, and I don't think that the leaders understand how important it is and how fast we are losing our positioning in the country.
A spokesperson for the mayor's office sent us the following statement, saying in part, Portland Syrups is a valued part of our local business community, and Mayor Wilson remains committed to fostering a strong business environment in Portland. We understand the challenges of navigating taxes and expansion costs and are actively working with businesses like Portland Syrups to explore potential solutions. It went on saying the mayor's office recently met with Mr. McLaughlin and encouraged him to stay in Portland. Mr. McLaughlin has already been in contact with Prosper Portland's food and beverage liaison, and we're continuing discussions to help identify suitable space for his expansion. Well, I texted Dan about 90 minutes ago, and he said there were no action items following his meeting with the city, and he's waiting on some kind of follow-up. Now, it's worth noting, in Mayor Wilson's proposed budget, he calls for a more than $6 million cut in general funds to Prosper Portland. That's the city office focused on building an equitable economy. If approved, that cut would result in the early termination of some program contracts, programs meant to help small businesses here, just like Dan's. Well, coming up on the story, after more than a century of serving Eastern Oregon residents, a local newspaper in Malheur County is shutting down. We've highlighted some of their reporting here on the show, so we caught up with the owner to find out why the ink is drying up. That's next, when the story returns. Well, don't expect Nike founder Phil Knight to put in an offer to buy the Portland Trail Blazers. Just one day after the team announced it's officially for sale, the richest man in the state says he's not interested. Knight and Alan Smolinski, a minority owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers, reportedly submitted an offer of more than $2 billion to buy the Blazers back in 2022. But in a statement to The Athletic today, Knight said, quote, "5 years ago, when I was a younger man, I had a great interest in being a part of the Portland Trail Blazers franchise. However, at my current age," he's 87, "I can confirm that I no longer have interest." An Eastern Oregon newspaper known for its in-depth investigative reporting, which we've highlighted here on the story, is shutting down. For more than 100 years, the Malheur Enterprise has served residents of Malheur County and surrounding areas. Les Zeitz, a former investigative reporter with the Oregonian, has owned and operated the paper for the past 10 years. But he's ready to retire. Over the past decade, Zeitz says the paper has bucked nationwide trends and grown. He attributes the success to the Enterprise's investigative reporting, which has earned the paper a flurry of national awards.
The presumption in rural areas is that no one's paying attention, nobody's interested, and that's absolutely not true. We found a readership intently interested in our monitoring of county government, city government, of how people were spending taxpayer money.
Zeitz says he looked for someone to buy the paper, but couldn't find anyone with the business and journalism experience to take it over. The last printed edition was released a week ago. The paper's website will shut down at the end of the month. Well, coming up next on the story, our coverage leading up to the 45th anniversary of the Mount St. Helens eruption continues. Tonight, we bring you a story from our archives from this week in 1980, as early plumes of ash began spewing into the sky. That's next when the story returns. Well, Sunday, May 18th, marks the 45th anniversary of the eruption of Mount St. Helens. All this week here on The Story, we're taking you back in time to see how KGW covered the lead up to that unforgettable day. And tonight, we have a segment from May 13th, 1980, as the prelude to the violent eruption was just getting underway. Here's Boyd Levitt.
Today's eruptions have been the most vigorous. Ash fell 20 miles north of the peak in a path 30 miles wide. The height of the eruptions worried the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA classified a 30-mile wide area extremely hazardous to aircraft. Geological Survey personnel retreated from their base camp at Timberline. The big bulge caused by molten rock showed signs today its twin peaks on the north flank had shifted further apart.
It certainly looks to me like the south rim is much higher above those north peaks than we've seen them before. We've noted that north rim has really considerably changed. We have two distinct peaks there. And we're having more eruption coming up in the center of the vent again. That bulge is really quite distinct now.
A yellow sulfur-colored mantle now stains the 9,000-foot level. Scientists have been frustrated that they have not been able to get better samples of the gases coming out of the top of the mountain. Today in Vancouver, scientists for the U.S. Geological Survey were trying to sample pieces of ash that have come out the top of the mountain to see if they might contain samples of the gas. It's been too dangerous to get gas samples by flying through the clouds. So these government scientists are performing delicate studies of ash samples to see what chemicals they contain. So far, they've not found evidence that the molten rock is any closer to eruption. But the shaking and crumbling on the volcano's exterior is another story. And even the slightest unconfirmed report of new volcanic activity has jammed telephone lines between Portland and Vancouver. Boyd Levitt, News 8.
My goodness, those images. Now a reminder, since we don't have a show on the actual anniversary this Sunday, be sure to tune in on Friday night for special coverage, including some never-before-seen photographs that we're just getting a look at ourselves. You don't want to miss it. We would also love to hear your stories regarding the eruption of Mount St. Helens. So where were you May 18th, 1980? We'll feature some of your comments in the show on Friday. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. And that's the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. If you ever miss an episode of The Story at 6:30, we re-air it at 8:30 and 10:30 p.m. on our TV app, KGW+. You can also catch it at 11:30 the following morning. Download that free app right now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. In the meantime, have a great Wednesday night. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.